What is like the process of getting whatever your source material is into these finished products, right? We can sit down, we can talk about some glitch art and video synthesis and video art and such, and maybe make some on stream. Why not? That seems like a fun little thing. But yeah, glitch art. Okay, guys, so I come from an era of I was a videographer and filmmaker. I started my journey into video when video became like relatively accessible, right? I was able to get for, several $100s a really good quality DV camcorder. I was actually able to get a couple of them, right? I worked my ass off and I made some money and I said, I'm gonna buy a Canon GL2. I got a GL1 as well as a backup. I got 3 cameras and I started going to everywhere I could. I started going to concerts and talking to bands and recording stuff. I started at the age where it's like, if you worked in digital video in the early 2000s and you told someone who worked in film that you were a filmmaker, you might have words. So it was a weird time. There was this little bit of gatekeeping with film editors and creators who were like, this newfangled digital thing is not filmmaking. And I've seen a little bit, honestly, not as much gatekeeping as I had feared initially within the glitch art and video synthesis community. I use these terms as like big, broad umbrella terms. So like, I'm not gonna be that guy who says, hey, you don't do X, Y, and Z, therefore it's not really video synthesis. So it's a big field of art that basically encompasses a lot of different things, from like installation work to things that are very much like digital editing processes. There's a bunch of different methods that people use within the realm of glitch art and video synthesis, and image synthesis for that matter. It's all kind of rooted in video art, right? And when I talk about video art, like probably the father of video art is Namjoon Paik, right? And they were a Korean artist who worked with video primarily, right? And they did some interesting things where it's like they would introduce glitches into video by just running video through a CRT and then attaching a magnet to the side of it to distort it in various ways to create various effects. They were really big for making big installation pieces with like walls of CRT monitors. Something they've done here, which is, and like I think when you see this, you might say to yourself, okay, that is what I think of, right? So for me, when I got into this whole idea of glitch art and video synthesis, it came to me through, partly I just appreciate the aesthetic that is this kind of thing. I have a little bit of a background in broadcasting, so I was able to use equipment that could generate these effects and mix videos, right? Like video mixers, relatively expensive tools. So being able to play with those things was really great for me, right? And I was really influenced by Winamp visualizers and VJs of the 90s and 2000s for various chiptune artists, right? Live concert visualizations is definitely a discipline under the umbrella here. Taking a magnetron TV on purpose is pretty interesting and funny. Absolutely, right? And this is someone, and look, you can see here Namjoon Paik working with chroma keying as well as like video feedback, right? So you can see the like trails of the people as they dance, right? And that kind of trailing is a video camera being pointed at a monitor of that video camera feed. So this is an effect. This is actually probably the easiest way to describe like video feedback and video synthesis. Some of these components that are used in this kind of art is that. And if anyone has opened OBS and just opened like the screen capture and then you full screen it and it's the infinite tunnel, right? And so it's utilizing that effect combined with things like chroma keying and luma keying, green screen technology basically, right, to create these variety of effects and mix them in interesting ways. And Namjoon Paik was known for actually incorporating it in music, which is partly like when I say like I was connected to this through VJing, right? I think there is a distinct lineage in video art, video synthesis, glitch art that is like closely tied to music and to performance. One of the most interesting Namjoon Paik pieces that I have come across was something called, I think it was just called the cello, and it was 3 CRT TVs stacked on top of each other, right? And these 3 CRT TVs had videos of a variety of cellists from all over the world recorded and being played. And someone would sit there and play the CRTs alongside it, right? So it's this really interesting connection between music, between video, and you can do a lot of really interesting things with the idea of like modern technology and video and surveillance, right? I mentioned the feedback loop. This is actually something that almost anyone can do this kind of stuff. And it's one of the core components. And for me, something that really struck me that was about this whole art form is that there's a physicality to it, especially when you use some of the more analog components, routing video signals through other sources and physically manipulating it in a certain way that produces interesting effects. Like, that is just kind of mind-blowing to me. So a little bit more history. Nam June Paik, for reference, that was in the 1960s, right? So in the 1970s, there was Jamie Fenton and Raul Zaritsky, and they actually made some glitch art by taking a Bally arcade machine, like the Bally arcade video console, right? And it was a cartridge-based home console machine. And they actually, basically, if you punched it in a certain way, it would pop the cartridge out, but still keep some of the connection, which would produce some interesting glitch effects. And then they made a score to the video of like the resulting video that they had captured from that, right? That was in the 1970s. And so you have these kind of experiments using different types of technology and different ways of manipulating that technology throughout the years. It's cart tilting for AV nerds. Mohast, it 100% is. Jamie Fenton and Raul Zaritsky created something called Digital TV Dinner in the 1979, right? Fenton has since changed their name. So she is the creator of this, and this is a Bally arcade system that they literally punched. They assaulted a Bally arcade home entertainment system and captured the resulting video and then scored it. Right? So from 1979, we have cart tilting, basically, as a visual medium. Yes, Solid Valentine. See, you get it, man. This and that is right. That is data bending, right? So when I was talking about that process, yeah, one of the ways you can do it, you can literally open JPEGs in Notepad++ and just delete chunks of text. See what happens to the image. It will produce these really interesting effects sometimes that you don't anticipate. Absolutely. That is 100% like one of the ways to go about it, right? And a lot of people create a lot of really interesting glitch art that way. When you get to the 2000s and the 2010s, you have bands like Anna Managuchi, actually, who I happen to be wearing the shirt for. They did, on their Endless Fantasy tour, they created custom lighting solutions, which included like bars of... Here, I can actually bring that up as well. You can see here, they have all of these... like bars of light in the background, which all are timed to this cube you can see on the right-hand side. And that cube is actually contains a projector, and they project images onto all the sides of the cube, and it is timed to react to the lights that are elsewhere on the stage, right? So it's a whole big lighting visual art setup that they have. You have artists like experimenting with different ways to do this. So yeah, some of the methods, right? You could just do glitch art with Photoshop. One of the things you'll see actually coming up when I start talking about one of the tools I do use, Cathodimer, is blend modes, right? Things like replace, add, multiply, right? Like in inverted modes, ways to blend multiple images together. That's really what it is, man. It's synthesis, right? It's taking components from two distinct things and combining them to create a separate whole, which is why I'm like, dude, big umbrella term, right? That's the very like aesthetic approach to it, right? Where you embrace the kind of look and feel of a CRT, the sounds, the hum, right? The scrolling images, the type of blur and pixelation. And it heavily influenced by like chromatic aberrations, so like splitting the red, green, and blue channels. Very, very common aspect of glitch art. And this is because that is a common way for these, analog technologies to go wrong. So embracing those things and emulating them in Photoshop, in After Effects. This is something that I have done for a long time. Like I said, I kind of love this aesthetic, so when I do things like I make transitions, right, for my video editing, I will oftentimes make, like glitchy static transitions inspired by the static between channels, tracking errors. Chromatic aberrations is a fan. Like those are things that I have always done and incorporated. So you could say that even like that's glitch art in one sense of the word. But I think when most people think of like video synthesis in particular, as opposed to just the look of glitch art, is they think about that kind of like physicality, right? Or the alterations, the ways that you subvert the normal processes. So there's some ways you could do that. There's something called data bending, which is data bending comes from circuit bending. So literally the way that some of these, especially old like electronic and chiptune artists, the way they would generate certain sounds is by using things like a speak and spell and literally bending circuits and crossing wires to produce connections that the toy didn't want to do, right? And so it would produce these weird sounds. And you can do the same thing with video, actually, in a lot of ways. My Trident from Eternal Champion CD from your portfolio, was that created with After Effects? So that was actually created with a it was an app called Vaporgram, I believe. One of the things that came out of glitch art and has come out of video art is some of the styles, right? And vaporwave is definitely a style that hews closely to glitch art, right? Using chromatic aberrations and like segmented photos and things like that, right? Interesting blend techniques. And so this, I do. There is an app out there. It's for mobile for free. I believe it's called Vaporgram, and that is what I use to produce the Trident one, actually. That uses chroma keying and as well as like a fake CRT rounded effect, right, and some blend modes as well to produce that effect. That is probably the best, honestly. Like if you're interested in this kind of stuff, that is the best low impact way to get into it. You can pick up some image editing software, and you can pick up one of these free apps for mobile or for PC or Mac or whatever, and kind of toy around with the aesthetics of it, right? And for me, part of it was I've played with the aesthetics of it for so many years now that I was like, there are physical processes that you could do that would actually accomplish these things. So that's the kind of direction I'm going in now, right? A couple really good other ways you could do it. As an extension of circuit bending, there is data bending, which is basically using files in unconventional ways. Like what happens if you open a file in Notepad or an image in Audacity, right? And there are ways you could do this and to like manipulate the data of a file to create interesting effects by like processing them in unconventional ways. Some of this has led to the idea of data moshing, and data moshing is actually really cool. This is something that, if you were watching music videos in the 2000s, you might have seen some stuff like this. The idea of data moshing is that you take a video and you only update the data that is actually in motion. So anything that remains still in the camera remains on screen, and the only things that get replaced are the actual in motion bits. So if you have something completely in motion like this, you could see it come into full focus. And then as it cuts to something else, only when the motion starts in the next cut do you start seeing the effect take place, right? And it creates this like chunky pixelated thing, which, guys, if you did any work with mini DV cameras, you have likely seen this happen when one of your tapes goes bad, right? When something happens, if you got junk on your tape head, if you got something like that, this kind of pixelation and this kind of data moshing where certain bits of the video information was not encoded properly, so it created this weird like swoosh effect, right? You would also get this a lot in old rips, man. If you were like torrenting TV shows in the earlier days, many of the rips ended up like this. Porn artifacting, Mohast, you said what everyone was thinking. Those are kind of like low impact ways to do this stuff. If you want to get in, and like digital ways primarily, right? Like these are things that you don't need hardware to do. So like I think the glitch art that I do, I display it on a CRT TV, which is one that I got on my table over here, right? And part of that is just my personal preference for the format, for the look, for the aesthetic. Much of what I've been doing is strictly digital, and then it's simply displayed on a CRT. And I use, like I said, kind of the trappings of the medium in order to influence the kind of changes I make and the kind of visuals that I create. But if you want to get like more into the physical stuff, this is where you get into like video mixers, you get into... There's a pretty low cost point of entry, something called a dirty mixer. An artist called Carl Klomp had created something called as the dirty mixer, and it basically takes the ideas of circuit bending and just like strips away any finesse, right? And it creates some really interesting effects. And so basically you can get these little boxes that have the 2 video inputs and 1 video output. And it takes those 2 video signals and it smashes them together. It is just like, I'm gonna load you both into a cannon, shoot you at each other in this tiny little box. And the explosion that comes out the other end is gonna be what it's gonna be. And like I said, so it uses circuit bending because like basically it will literally take just a video switcher and then it will like add resistors and change the voltage of things so that the video doesn't process in the expected way. Because it's just, there's no processing, there's no signal mixing, there's no sync happening. I'm using some terms here which are technical terms. I'm trying not to get too into the technical weeds, but like if you wanted to move beyond that, right? There are things like proper video mixers. So, like I said, one of my first exposures to this whole process was learning broadcasting. And when I was studying that, we had access to really good video mixers with chroma key abilities and luma key abilities and, right, like a titler inside it. So, like, you could do some really interesting things. And if you played with these video signals in certain ways, yeah, you could do this. You could do an internal feedback loop. Instead of a camera on a monitor, you can just have it feedback within itself, within a mixer. And once again, because it's seeing itself and reacting to it, it produces really interesting visual shapes, which is often what you will see in things like Winamp visualizers and, music, VJ and visual elements for musicians. So that's kind of the next layer, right? Where you use cameras, you use broadcast equipment, but this starts getting expensive, man. And I'll admit, like there are a couple of relatively affordable options for this kind of stuff. Stuff like Freedom Enterprises Mismatcher Petite. So this thing is a couple $100, right? But it comes with a lot of stuff, like a Carl Klomp, a dirty mixer. Slightly better, right? But you have these tools for relatively accessible prices. But then you get into the shit like the big racks. So like when you think of someone doing a big VJ show, you think of the visualizations for Peter Robinson or frickin' Zed or whatever, right? Like those things are likely being produced with high-end visualizers, Eurorack models. For you audio nerds out there, you're right, all your Eurorack audio gear, you get a big fucking stand and you plug shit in and maybe you need a synth and maybe you need a whatever, right? Like, and you can create your own setup. You can do that with with video stuff too. LZX Industries is probably one of is like the flag bearer, the standard bearer for those kind of tools. But there are places like Freedom Enterprise doing great stuff and having much more accessible options as well. So those are kind of like the tiers, right? And so like when I got really going with this glitch art thing recently, I've started working on it in earnest. And the tool that I started to use was something called Cathodimer. And Cathodimer it's a little bit of a video synthesizer where it will generate its own video patterns. It's a little bit of a video mixer, but it's not really those things, right? Like, it's not actually a video mixer. It's not actually a visualizer or a dirty mixer or a Eurorack thing. It is actually it's a CRT rendering solution. So it is a rendering engine designed to display your video as if it was on a CRT. And it has a lot of options within that to allow you to customize your like pixel size. We're going to get to this. I'm going to show off Cathodimer in just a minute. But you have an opportunity to like go through this kind of stuff, right? And like emulate the environment of a CRT TV, but all digitally. But it does have a synthesizer. It does have a scanline generator. It does have some of these things which you would find in a Eurorack type setup. And it does have some components of Photoshop and the blend modes and ways you can mix and blend video and images together. But this is something that this is like $20. It's $20 like on Steam. So y'all can go check out Cathodimer on Steam. It's worth it. If you're interested in trying this kind of stuff, if you try some of the like glitch art mobile apps and you're like, ooh, I like the look of that, but I want more control over what is actually happening with the processes, instead of just like how intense is my chromatic aberration, right? Then Cathodimer, I think, is actually a really good solution. It's a little obtuse, which is partly why I'm going to go over it. I think you can produce some interesting stuff with it. So, yeah, I think that's what we're going to do right now. And we're gonna make some art, man. So I have actually been provided some of the character portraits for the characters from Train Tracks Combat, from the game from Sunshine FGC. And Hypergrav, who kind of like inspired me to talk to y'all about this kind of stuff, had suggested maybe we try to make something out of some Tia art from Breaker's Revenge. So I think that's gonna be fun. So we're gonna walk through what Cathodimer is and how it works, and maybe make some cool stuff in the process. And I hope you join in and have some fun with it.